It's so exciting that it's finally here again. And this year we have a very special treat for you. Just in case we haven't met, my name is Meredith Garofalo, and I'm an award-winning meteorologist and space and science correspondent. I'm based in Cleveland, Ohio, but I have been all over the country working at local and national TV stations, not just bringing the weather, but now starting to bring more in the way of space and STEM communications, which has been so fun. I'm doing it a little more freelance now, but I'm dedicating a lot of my career to connecting with the space community and especially women in the space community to talk about the next generation of how we can get young girls and women, especially in STEM careers, to get excited and to jump in to the space industry because, as we know, space is for everybody. So this panel is so exciting. It's called Visionary Women, Transforming Space Through Science and Innovation. And we are going to be celebrating the achievements of these amazing women that you see here in the space industry and really talk about the importance of inspiring and supporting the next generation of women as well as girls all across the space industry. This inspirational panel is going to celebrate the achievements of each one of these remarkable women. And we're also going to inspire and provide practical advice for the next generation of female space leaders and innovators. So, hi, ladies. We're going to go around. I'll let you do a little bit of an introduction. So we'll start with Camille.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. My name is Camille Bergin. You might know me online as the Galactic Gal. I'm an aerospace engineer turned space content creator, and my mission is to educate everyone about the amazing work that we are doing in the space industry and why it is so important for improving life on Earth and helping humanity explore the stars.
Awesome. Glad to have you. Emily.
Hi. Sorry, trying to navigate my phone on the go here. But hi, everyone. My name is Emily Calandrelli. Online, I'm known as the Space Gal. I'm an MIT aerospace engineer turned Emmy-nominated science TV show host. Most people now know me for my Netflix show, Emily's Wonder Lab. But I'm an author of 9 children's science books, and I'm flying to space with Blue Origin sometime soon. So that's the next thing on the docket there. And I'm launching a science YouTube series called Emily's Science Lab on YouTube in a couple of weeks. So some fun things in the works, but everything that I do, I try to make science and space feel more accessible to more people because, as you said, Meredith, space and science are for everyone.
I love that. And speaking of a woman who flew in space, how about Dr. Proctor? You're up next.
Hey everyone, I'm Dr. Sian Proctor. I'm a visionary artist, I'm a geoscientist, and I'm an astronaut. I am the first artist to be selected to go to space and become an astronaut. I flew in 2021 with SpaceX Inspiration 4. It was a 3-day mission where not only did I become the first woman commercial astronaut spaceship pilot, but I'm to date the only African-American woman to pilot a spaceship. And I got to paint in space, which was very exciting to do as an artist and a poet. And I've been teaching geology and geoscience classes at the community college for 26 years now. And so a lot of different hats that I wear.
Awesome. We're happy to have you here as well. Shawna, you're up next.
SP is following SP. So I'm the other Dr. SP on this panel. I am a physician. I am a newly named commercial astronaut with the IIAS Commercial Research Astronaut Corps. I also lead their space medicine group, through which we've done a number of world firsts. So we were the first to send a continuous glucose monitor to space on a suborbital flight. We were the first to champion women's health very high. The first to demonstrate the successful insertion and removal of an IUD in microgravity environment as of last month. And we also champion a lot of technological innovation and neuroscience research at our space medicine group. I teach our space medicine course, and I've just stepped up as the executive director of our flight opportunities program, which delineates the curriculum and qualification criteria for any future flyers under our organization. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much. And last but certainly not least, speaking of another scientist, we've got Emma in the house.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. My name is Emma Louden. I am an astrophysicist, strategist, speaker, and the latest addition to my hyphens is children's book author. I'm writing a book called Mia and the Martians based on my journey into space, which will be coming out later this year. I study exoplanets at Yale, and I'm in my 5th year of my PhD studying the systems beyond our own solar system, but all with the goal of trying to use what we learn about other systems to feel more connected to our own home planet and spread practical hope with space.
I love that. Well, so glad to have, we'll call you the Fab Five on the show. And we're going to actually go over to Emily to start because as we were talking about, sometimes our jobs and our careers keep us on the go, especially Emily being a mom. And so before we get into the entire panel, since Emily is actually catching a flight in just minutes, I'm going to let her share a little bit about her inspirational story, her mission, breaking barriers, and also some advice, not just to young women and young girls and kids everywhere, but to moms especially.
Yeah, oh my gosh. So I guess if I were to focus on one thing, it would be the fact that I didn't see myself in STEM or in space when I was a kid. My dad grew up in poverty in West Virginia, and his only dream for us, for his kids, was really financial security. And so the biggest dream that I dreamt for myself when I was a kid was a job that made good money where my family wouldn't have to worry about food or a roof over our heads. And that was my dream. And so when I was a high school senior, I looked up all the majors that you could major in college, and I looked at their starting salaries. And that is how I decided to go into engineering. And it wasn't because I knew any scientists or engineers growing up. I didn't. It wasn't because I went to a rocket launch. I never did. It wasn't because we went to space camp. I never did. It was literally because of the money. And then when I got there, I fell in love with it. I found the adventure and the awe and the discovery, and I just became enamored with all of it. And so for me, with a lot of the work that I do, I want to try to reach a kid like myself who wasn't introduced to it from a younger age, but could still be very valuable in that field nonetheless. Like, even if your foundation is lower, your ceiling can be higher. And I that's the type of message that I hope that kids like myself, maybe people who don't come from the most privileged backgrounds, will be able to see, because there is space for everyone. There's opportunity for everyone here to succeed. And it's something that I am very passionate about. So if I were to focus on one of the key messages, it would be that of kids of underprivileged backgrounds. And then with people who want to have families, and maybe somebody who wants to be a mom, there are ways to do that. And I think that adds so much, just like anything else. Like, if you have a different passion, if you're artistic, if you're creative, like these other things that you care about, they just add to, they don't subtract away from your value in this industry. And one of the things that I'm passionate about is family and motherhood. And so I feel like that aspect of me is a value add to the work that I do in science and storytelling. And so all of these interests, I feel like people should embrace their multitudes, their multi-hyphenate nature, because it just adds to the value in the space industry and beyond.
Real quick, Emily, one of the things I'd interviewed you for space.com, and you talked about just how when, for example, you and I were going to school, it was amazing how little women were involved and just how it's grown, but we still have a very long way to go. And it starts with women like the ones you see here on this panel.
Yeah, right. I think the biggest part of it is community, because when you feel othered, regardless of what it's because of, if it's your gender or your race or your sexual orientation or whatever it is, when you feel like you're the odd person out in a room, it's so important to find that community so that you have people to be like, this just happened. I don't know how to feel about it. Has this happened to any of you? Like that type of outlet is so crucial to be able to survive the ebbs and flows and the ups and downs and the trials and tribulations of any field. And so building that community whenever and wherever you can is like so key. And so for me, my female friendships, the people who are in this world, who are in the space world, like that I can turn to when I have those types of issues, like they are my saving grace. They're my board that I go to. They're my peers, my heroes. And that community, I think, is so crucial to be able to survive and thrive in this type of field.
And I think too, when it comes to, lifting each other up, I mean, you and I met in Denver back in 2017, and, we were both going our different ways, and now, just rising in our careers, but each on a different path. And I think the fact that we can still talk and support each other, and how so many women on this panel, you guys all know each other, even if it's virtual and supporting, I think the whole fact of women supporting women these days, it's essential.
Yeah, and a lot of like information sharing, because that's one of the key parts here is that for so many of us, like we don't know how much people are getting paid. We don't know how people are making their businesses work. Like having that information sharing is so key. And yeah, I think the idea that like a rising tide lifts all boats is so crucial. And just to know that my friend Kelly always says this, that, competition happens at the bottom and collaboration happens at the top. And I think when you realize that there is, there's so much space for all of us to do this, even though we're overlapping in so many ways, like look how many men there are around, like there's so much space for us. And when we can help each other, we sort of expand that space for all of us.
I love it. Emily, feel free to stay on and jump in where you can, but we know you also have to jump on a flight. So we were so happy, the Space Gal, to join us on this panel today. But we're going to jump right in to hear a little bit about everybody's inspirational journeys and talk a little bit about, where we've all come from and just how we've developed into ourselves today. So why don't we start out with the Sian, share just a little bit about your inspirational journey.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I have been chasing space my entire life. My dad, I was born on Guam because my dad was working at the NASA tracking station during the Apollo mission. So I grew up with memorabilia to him on his office wall. Now it's on mine. But what's interesting is that, my dad was a hidden figure. Both of my parents were born in a time of segregation. My dad was born in 1940. My mom was born in 1933. Their entire childhood into adult, half of their lives was in segregation in the United States. And so neither of my parents had college degrees, but my dad was amazingly optimistic, even having come out of that system, that education was the way to break down barriers and to create opportunity. So he encouraged me and my siblings to become as educated as we could be, whether that's formal or informal education. We have a love of lifelong learning. And so I went off and I became Dr. Proctor, a geoscience professor for the last 25 years, teaching geology and sustainability classes at the community college. But what's interesting is I had always tried to also become an astronaut as like on a side thing. And I got my pilot's license, scuba diving. I was an explorer as a kid, always running around trying to learn new things. And in 2009, I applied for the NASA astronaut selection process, and I got down to the yes/no phone call. It was a heartbreaking no at the end. But one of those things is when we face disappointment, how we take on disappointment and setbacks is just as important as how we celebrate wins and finding a path forward, particularly when you suffer from imposter syndrome and you're wondering, do I belong here? Should I be here? And when you don't see other people who look like you, who speak like you, who have a background that's similar to you, let me tell you, that imposter syndrome is real. And so after that, I thought, well, and instead of being all disappointed that I'm not a NASA astronaut, I should celebrate the fact that I was almost a NASA astronaut. I got down to the less than 1% out of thousands of applicants. And that was my way of finding a path forward. And I decided that if I can't help advance human spaceflight up there in space, that I would do it down here as an analog astronaut. So I started living in Moon and Mars simulations, and so I was doing that for pretty much the last decade. And we went into COVID in 2020. And what I found from living in Moon and Mars simulations is you really get to know yourself and the things that you need and creativity. how you express yourself creatively really matters. And during COVID, I wanted to spread cheer around the world, and I became a postcard artist, not knowing that 9 months later it would win me a seat to space. So I started doing art and poetry. And then in 2021, that they announced the first all-civilian mission to orbit, and that you could win a seat to space. And so I applied to the prosperity seat, which required creating a 2-minute video expressing why they should take you to space as an entrepreneur. And I said, well, I found my authentic voice as an artist and a poet. And so I wrote a poem called Space to Inspire. And it's all about why we should create a Jedi space, a just, equitable, diverse, and inclusive space for all of humanity. And the next thing you know, I was training to become the mission pilot of a Dragon, a SpaceX Dragon spaceship. And I got to spend 3 days in orbit, which was mind-blowing. I got to paint in space, but most importantly, as a geoscientist, I discovered Earthlight for myself. And as a result, I've been working ever since to bring Earthlight down to Earth and to share the message of never give up hope. I went to space at 51. You know, when we talk about back, when you said back in our day, Meredith, I was like, in your day? Wait a minute. I think I'm like, how much older than all of the people on this panel? But yeah, and sharing that message of hope and letting people know that don't give up on your dreams. You might zig and zag through life, but always have hope and always move forward with your learning. And remember to always let your earth light shine. That's my message to anybody who's listening.
I love it. Oh my gosh. I know the inspiration that, inspiration for, I mean, you go to the name right there for that mission. And, Shawna, you've got a mission that's coming up. And I imagine your story is similar, but you also have your own background that brought you to where you are today.
Yeah, it just makes so much sense for me to follow Emily and Sian, because so many of the elements of their stories ring true. And behind the scenes, there's barely half a degree of separation between all of us. We've been supporting each other for years. Emma and I have been at the same Dark Sky festivals and on the same panels. Sian and I helped fundraise for her flight, and for before the space flight was announced, just seeing the power of what Sian was doing as a scientist, as an artist. I nominated her for the Explorers Club 50 Explorers Changing the World. And, in the first year, that was recognized. And so there's a lot of support, to Emily's point, about women supporting women. And, voting Kelly is something I do a lot as well, because, we're building up the astronautics program as well. So, you get to a point in your life, to your question, Meredith, about how you ended up where you are. You start reflecting on your childhood and the elements that brought you here. And more so now than ever since my announcement, I do think about that, because my parents were immigrated from India to Canada in the 80s. They packed up everything they had in 2 suitcases, and simply because they wanted to create a better life for themselves and the children that they didn't have yet, they left everything behind. And this was in the days of very limited connectivity. If you wanted to phone home, you would have to make a long distance phone call back home, and every second counted would be something you'd be billed for. And so, that spirit of adventure started with, let's do this. Let's leave everything we've known behind in beautiful tropical Mumbai, India, and let's move to the middle of nowhere, rural Manitoba, in the dead of winter, minus 35 degrees Celsius, which is also very cold in Fahrenheit. And, let's build a life for ourselves. And everything that my parents did since was, very strategic, very oriented at saying, what will give our children a leg up in their future careers. And, coming from a Southeast Asian background, parents tend to have a lot of high ambitions for their kids. But this started with everything from being outdoorsy from the outset. My parents discovered camping early in life, as young as 2, we would be tenting, and as a family, we would be privy to these beautiful night skies. And I would just remember looking at those stellar displays of galactic beauty and thinking, I want to be out there. I want to be amongst the stars. And then continuing that with being a Girl Guide. And when I was as young as 14, taking 6-year-olds on weekend-long camping trips and being responsible for their discovery of nature, doing outdoor ed, just being learning to be resilient and resourceful, and not worrying about the fact that you were the only one who looks like you, the only girl. It didn't matter, because you just were so excited about the potential that lay ahead for you. And the other side of that is representation does matter. For me, my astronaut journey also began in childhood. I grew up during the 90s watching Dr. Roberta Bondar, Canada's first female astronaut, fly to space. And I thought, oh my gosh, Canadian women can do that. Okay, so I just need to do what she did and go be a neuroscientist and an astronaut. And then and for the longest time, I was a neuroscientist and a physician. And as of the summer, I get to be an astronaut. And then together with Kelly, we are building a path that will really forge the way forward for cementing research, commercial astronautics as a venue for catalyzing access to research in space, and really capitalizing on space and microgravity as the next great research laboratory. So, it's been an incredible ride, but to the points of Sian and Emily, it really is this culture of lifting each other up, free-flowing information, asking, if you're not sure, and, soliciting each other's opinions on tough problems. And then finally, for me, approaching every single challenge and relationship with the hypothesis that no problem is insurmountable. It just requires working the problem and doing it with really good people.
That's great. I mean, I just love how some of the stories include, I wanted to go to space or looked up at space when I was a child, and then others that it wasn't until later in your career that you got bitten by the space bug. And, Camille, I got to meet you at a space conference, and I remember hearing your story, which is so inspiring in a different way, just going from being part of that STEM world and now just what you're doing as a social media influencer.
Yeah. So I don't like the word influencer.
Okay. All right. I will take
no,
that back.
everyone, I'm using this as an opportunity to educate. No, science communicator, just because feel like it just has such a negative connotation now. And all of these amazing women, we're talking about space and we're getting people involved. And that's just such a different way to use social media, right? And I think that that's such an important reason for social media to exist, but I'll get there in a second. So my background also is very much like Emily's, grew up in rural Appalachia, and, didn't see STEM around me, didn't see anybody in STEM careers. I didn't see anybody that looked like me. And so my dad would always say to me growing up, hey, Camille, you'd make a great engineer. And every single time I would just look him in the eyes and say, no, Dad, that's for boys. And I legitimately thought that. And obviously, now I don't think that, but at the time I did, because I didn't see anybody that looked like me. And, growing up in rural North Carolina, I was in the gifted programs, but that was not cool. And I think this goes for, anywhere you're at, but being in a rural environment, I think amplifies the problem when you're not exposed to anybody around you that can help bring you out of that bubble and say, hey, no, actually, this is something that you can do. It's not out of reach for you at all. But I grew up in this culture of, a lot of people stayed in that small town. A lot of people went to the college. There's a great college. My parents went there, which is why why I lived there. But I wanted something actually space is bigger than all of us, right? I wanted that. But I never thought that I could do that. And the only reason actually that I even knew about space is because we lived in Florida for about 1.5 years when I was 4. And thankfully, I wasn't too young to remember it, but I barely remember it. But, we lived on the other side of the peninsula, right where that hurricane is hitting right now, unfortunately. But you could see the trail of the space shuttle. We went up and stood on a parking deck to get the highest vantage point. And I was like, oh my gosh, we're building this giant rocket. What's a rocket, right? We're building this giant rocket and we're launching people to space. And oh, there's also like science and research and all of this stuff on there. Obviously, I didn't know that at the time. I was probably just more enamored with, oh my God, they're going to space. But I looked up at my parents and I was like, I want to be an astronaut. Like, that's so cool. But then we moved back to North Carolina. And then I was like, oh no, people are making fun of me. People are teasing me. I'm also an only child. So having that social support at school is like even more important, I think. And so I kind of hid it, I kind of pushed it down. Like you would never see like my studio behind me now. Like I would never show anybody like space stuff. Like now I have a tattoo on my arm about space. Like I would never do that. So I actually went into music. And so, all the conversations we're having about being multi-hyphenate, I think is so important because I actually went to high school at a music conservatory and lived there away from home. I was 15 and I was studying to be a professional trumpet player. And like, I love, the integration of art and STEM and all of that stuff now. But at the time I was like, nope, this is it. Like I'm on this path, right? That's also male dominated. So I've just been in male dominated my careers my whole life. But I actually had a female mentor. She happened to be the dean of the high school, weird high school structure. We had deans because it was a university. And she also taught calculus, and she helped me get more math and science outside of the traditional curriculum that we were taught there because it was an art school. And I just fell in love with it. I love, I'm so nerdy, but I love calculus. And then, I went on to love differential equations and all that stuff. And so when I went into college, I was like, okay, it's really important for me to find a place where I can do math or some sort of math and music. I didn't know what sort of math that I wanted to do. And it wasn't until we went to tour schools and I was like, I don't really like the math department. Like I don't vibe with that environment for whatever reason. And my dad was like, can you please just listen to me? You're going to make a great engineer. We're going over to this engineering college and you're going to check it out. And I was like, okay, dad, whatever. Right. I was like 15 or 16 at the time, 16 probably. But I walk into the school and I see all of these women and I'm like, I mean, there aren't that many, right? But there are way more than I've ever seen in a STEM career, STEM field. And I'm like, whoa, I can do this. Like I see there's another, at the time I was blonde. So, oh, there's another blonde girl. Like I could do that. That's so cool. And so anyways, I'm just going on a huge ramble at this point, but I went
It's
to
okay.
the University of Tennessee and they had an amazing women in STEM program. And it wasn't we're going to force you to be in STEM to get our numbers up, like some of the other colleges I toured, and unfortunately that was their motto. But it was, we're going to give you the support system that you need to succeed in this. We're going to match you with mentors and we're going to help you with research opportunities. And you're going to live with all these women in engineering your first year. We're going to give you that. And then if you don't like it, we'll help you find somewhere else. Right. And that was just so important to me. So, all that being said, I then ended up working in engineering, but I only lasted about a year in engineering full time because I quickly realized it was not what college was like. And so I switched over to business development. And so that's where I got, the high level strategic thinking. How do we raise money? How do we do this strategically? How do we build partnerships and work with the government and stuff like that at both big aerospace companies and small startups? And then about 6 months ago, I guess 7 now, in February of 2024, I decided, okay, now's the time. We're going to do communications, marketing, content creation for space full time and help people understand what we're doing in space, because I got to see all that we're doing in space and see the value of it. And I think that we have, such an opportunity right now to communicate that to the next generation and to other people that are interested in it.
I love that. You know what? I am so glad you corrected me about social media influencers because I think, now, honestly, and we can all agree, we see that out there a lot.
Yeah.
But it gives a bad connotation. And a lot of us, we've got degrees, we've got experience and, science, STEM, space communicators. I mean, I think as a generation and for generations to come, and just for a group of women that are out there communicating and using social media as tools to get these powerful messages across. I had to point that out there. So Camille, thank you so much.
No, I love it so much. Like I heard this a couple years ago and I use it all the time now, but there has never been a point in time until now where you can go online, like literally just open it up on your little thumbs, right? And find somebody talking about what they do in a field that you're interested in that looks like you. And that is just so important. And I just got chills talking about that, but that's, So social media is good. We can use it for good.
Amen to that. Emma, we got to hear your inspirational story. I mean, we are like 4 for 4 right now.
This has been so amazing to listen to, and it's so fun to be on this call and hear this theme of community brought up over and over, because it feels like even on this call, it is the family of women supporting women in space, and that community is growing, and that makes me just so excited for the future. My journey in space started with a love of space when I was very little, but no idea that I could possibly work in it. Neither of my parents are in STEM at all, but my dad always had a fascination with photography and telescopes, and he really loved going out and looking at the night sky. And I was lucky enough to grow up in a place in Utah where I could go outside at night and see the Milky Way above me. When I was little, my parents really restricted what I could do on the computer. And one of the only websites that I was allowed on was NASA's website. And so when I was little, one of my first memories is playing the games on NASA's website, which are phenomenal, by the way, and learning about the rover's spirit and opportunity. And it was those two little rovers wrapped in their like bubble wrap looking landing gear that bouncing down onto Mars that really sparked my interest in space. But I had no concept of what a job in space would look like, or that that was something that I could aspire to. So for years, my mom at the start of every school year would ask me what I wanted to be, and she would write it down and put it in the scrapbook. And all my whole childhood, basically, it was either dancer, acrobat, or teacher. I took some dance classes, did not like being told what to do, so that ended quickly. But I still love to teach, and acrobat also didn't work out. But it never occurred to me that I could possibly work in space. Later on in middle school, high school, I ended up in math and science classes, which I absolutely adored, and was grateful to find a community of only a few of us, but we got really close, other girls in my classes, and we would sit in the front row of our math class. We actually have little friendship bracelets that say front row girl. And we would go and learn all we could about this amazing field. But even in spite of that, like love for math and science, I still didn't really think, oh, I could apply this and work in space. It wasn't until my 8th grade, we did this round of like physics, chemistry, ecology, and biology, 4 quarters of 4 different science classes. And I loved the physics section. That like 6-week period was my favorite of all of junior high. And I talked to my amazing teacher who said, Emma, that you can combine this love that you have for space with this like exciting passion for physics. There's this field called astrophysics. So I, being the bookworm that I am, started to read all the books that I possibly could in the library about space and about astrophysics in particular, and started to think about, oh my gosh, what would it be to work in this field? Like, what would that look like? And how could I do it? I stumbled across a program called the Summer Science Program on the bottom of a website. And I don't even remember what website it was now, and randomly applied. And I ended up spending 5.5 weeks in the desert of New Mexico, tracking an asteroid and writing the code to be able to learn how to figure out where that asteroid was coming from and if it would intercept the Earth or not. And those 5.5 weeks were my first real introduction into what it means to do research. I got to be challenged and to take a science project from from the photons coming through the telescope to the orbital elements that you submit to the Minor Planet Center. And it showed me that I really loved doing this research. It also was the first time that I really felt extreme imposter syndrome and extreme anxiety, and found myself in the midst of this really intense experience saying, oh my gosh, how do I keep going? And it was the community of people around me, and also the fact that we were in the desert of New Mexico. So at night, we were coming back from the telescope. If you pause and you looked up and you could see the night sky above you and say, oh yeah, like it feels so overwhelming right now, but we can pause, we can breathe, we can keep going. And that kind of was my theme through college too. I majored in astrophysics, loved it, but also experienced extreme anxiety and panic attacks in college. And the way that I dealt with that was grounding myself in the night sky. And that's why I believe so deeply in using space to spread what I call practical hope, where it's that reminder to pause and to breathe and then be able to get up and keep going the next day. finding what grounds us. In college, I participated in the Brooke Owens Fellowship Program, which is an amazing program for gender minorities in aerospace, and something I could go on and on about. But the key part of that was the power of community, and having other people who I can go to and say, like Emily was saying, oh my gosh, this happened to me. This was so weird. Like, how do we handle these situations? How much should I be asking for in this negotiation for a job? Or just sharing things that happen that are exciting. Having a community you can go to and say, oh my gosh, I'm so excited about this, and having other women around you who will lift you up. So journey is still continuing now in studying astrophysics as a PhD student, and I'm so excited to see where we go next and what hyphens we continue to add.
You know, I think the common theme of this group, and we are just, getting things going, is just how unique everyone's story is. And we all came from somewhere different backgrounds, different growing up, different majors, all in the STEAM field even. And together we're showing that space is for everyone and space is for all. And that even if it's just a tiny little bit of space in life, it's something we all can look up every single night and see. It's there. It's powerful. And I think that's going to transition into this next, I gotta call it a lightning round question. Well, meteorologist lightning. Okay. I have to throw a weather term in there, of course, but I'm going to go around each of you, and I want you to say, what was the most influential part of a mentor in your life and who that mentor was? So let's start with Shawna.
I needed a plan where I didn't get into medical school. I would be doing that I would be equally passionate about, happy doing, and in my path towards space as well. And so I was always keeping an eye out for opportunity for scholarships, for programs that would get me closer to goals. And throughout my undergraduate degree, I kept hearing about this place called the International Space University. And I'm like, what is this? Is this like Starfleet Academy? And so I applied to the master's program once I found out they had one. I also applied to medical school, and to my shock, I got into both. And that's kind of my first lesson when I realized that, there's no harm in asking when you're faced with hard decisions. It was the best but hard decision. It was a good, tough decision to have to make. And then I realized, look, what if I just go to the faculty of medicine and say, look, I know I'm accepted to med school in this year. You're well within your purview to say no, but this really will help me further my goals in medicine as well. And they believed in that opportunity. And there weren't a lot of yeses when the students asked for deferrals. So, having that environment of permissiveness and of believing in students was really, really key. And so then when I went to the master's program, I realized for the first time, oh my gosh, people make careers out of space medicine. And it wasn't until I got to the 3-month internship portion of the program that really came into place. So I was agonizing over the decision, didn't know where I wanted to do my internship. And then one of the faculty leads knew I had this passion for space medicine, had this passion for medicine. And he said, what about the European Astronaut Center? Do you want to apply there? And I did. And I got accepted to, I worked with their crew medical support office. And I ended up creating, as part of my thesis, a quick reference guide for hazards aboard the autonomous transfer vehicle, a brand new, at that time, transfer vehicle to the ISS backed by ESA. That was the first time I realized I could make my career. So just having faculty at ISU really catalyzed the way forward. So that moment sticks out. And then the other mentor I had at ISU was Dr. Chaki Mukai, the JAXA astronaut, who, her resume is miles long. She accomplished, she's accomplished JAXA astronaut. She's also just compassionate and you could ever meet. And, we would have these one-on-one sessions, and it was just beyond humanity you saw there. And it was just a constant reminder that, no matter how far you get, there's always going to be people who stop and help you along the way. And, they have to invest that. They made. I think the last example I'll end with is later on, when I was in 4th year medical school, I was lucky enough to be sponsored by the Canadian Embassy as one of 2 Canadian medical students to go to NASA Johnson Space Center on an aerospace medicine elective. They flew us to the CSA, they briefed us on what to expect, and they said, oh, by the way, while there, we'll get the Canadian astronauts to liaise with you. And I thought, okay, that's very nice of you to say, but they're astronauts. They clearly have better things to do. And the first day I got into my office, I was really frazzled. I'd misplaced my passport as foreign national. I needed that to get onto federal base at JSC. So, that was top of mind. So the phone in my office rang. I picked it up and I said, you have to hold on. I lost my passport. And then it was just one of those almost movie-like moments where a few seconds pass and then you realize who the other person on the other end of the phone was and what they said. And in my case, it was at the time Lieutenant Colonel Chris Hadfield, who was asking, if myself and the other student wanted to meet up for coffee. And it's not like the man wasn't busy. He was training to be the commander of the International Space Station at the time. And the fact that he made time to liaise with myself and David Saint-Jacques did as well, Jeremy Hansen, who's now going to the moon, did. They're busy people, but they really made that time to invest in some possibly quasi-anonymous medical student. And so that lesson really sticks with me to this day, is that we all have a duty to pay it forward, because no matter what aspects of our career we're at, someone somewhere is watching us and wants to be like us. And I wouldn't be where I am if, all these amazing people hadn't invested their time in me. And so I really take that to heart. And I do a lot of mentorship amongst the Zenith Pathways Fellowships, SEDS, Awesome 13. It's a very long list today. But, these people who didn't have to really took their time to invest in me.
Sure. Sian, how about for you? Who is one mentor that just sticks out and just really helped you become the incredible mentor that I know you are? I see it through your book and everything like that.
Oh, that's easy. It was my dad. He encouraged me ever since I can remember, and really fueled a love of books and learning. And I just remember as a kid, I would go into his office and, he was self-taught in math, and just he would be there working on problems and equations, and he'd be like, come on over here and let me show you this. And I'd be like, oh my God, Dad, but now I look back at all of those memories with such fondness, and he wasn't afraid to break down barriers. Like I was, an explorer. I wanted to go into the Air Force and fly. And there weren't, fighter pilot females at that time. And my dad didn't tell me that. Instead, he brought me to the model shop and said, pick out the model airplanes you want to buy. And here's the Civil Air Patrol, so you can see what life would be like under those types of conditions. And in Star Trek, he introduced me to Star Trek and Lieutenant Uhura and the Next Generation, and just fueled me with this love of sci-fi and Isaac Asimov. And he really just gave me the confidence that I could go out there and I could make my dreams into reality. And unfortunately, when I was in high school, he got sick and died when I was 19. And so he never got to see me become Dr. Proctor and eventually go to space and achieve all of these amazing things. But he really set the foundation of who I am, and gave me the courage to be able to go out there and get it.
I love that. And I'm sure he was just smiling from a star at you when you were up there in space. Camille, how about for you? Who is that one mentor that sticks out and just taught you what it's like to have a mentor, but also to be a mentor?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mentioned earlier that I only lasted a year in full-time engineering before I was like, get me out of here. It's actually the mentor that helped me get out of that. So my senior year of college, I had 3 different internships working across various aerospace projects. And the last one, I was working on Orion, the crew capsule that's taking us back to the moon. I was working at Lockheed Martin, and I was working on that during my first full-time job. And I was like, man, like, I really like this, but I also hate it. And I was like, you know what, just stick it out. Like, this was during my internship. But my senior year, I was like, actually, I think I'm just going to quit and become a wedding planner. I'm not kidding you. And I was great at school. I loved school, and I had a semester left. And so I was like, okay, maybe you should slow down a little bit. But then I got into my job, and I was like, no, it's still bad. Like, everyone told me to wait and that it would get better, and it's not. And now I've like learned about this like nebulous thing called business development. And that sounds awesome. Because then I can be in space, but do, and like kind of bridge the gap between the technical and the business. But everyone's telling me I have to wait like 10, 15 years. I am the most impatient person ever. That was never going to happen. And so I went to this mentor, his name is Mark, and he's in business development. And I was like, Mark, like, I'm feeling so like discouraged. I don't feel like I belong here. This is not what I signed up for at 18. Like, this is not what engineering school was like. I guess I'm just going to leave the industry and like find something else to do. Maybe I'll be a wedding planner, right? And he's like, don't do that. Like, don't, I mean, you can be a wedding planner if you want, Camille, but don't, because like you love space, right? And no hate on wedding planners. Like, I would still love to do that, but I got to do events in marketing in space, right? And so finding that connection was all because of him, because he's like, listen, like, let me help you find a way in that doesn't take 10 to 15 years. And so what he started to do was he started to like just forward me emails that were sent to upper level Lockheed Martin business development leadership. And it was a table of like all the open job opportunities that they had. And at Lockheed Martin, especially at the time, like all of the business development jobs were, again, 10, 15 years, like very high level. And I was like, why is he sending me this? Like, does he know I'm like freaking 22 years old or whatever? Like, what is he doing? And I finally like started to piece it together through actually another mentor, where she's like, yeah, I just like reached out. They were looking for support and like we're trying to hire an upper level leader. But those take a long time to hire, right? So I reached out and said, hey, actually, like, can I help you while you're looking for that help? Like, I know nothing, but I can do the work, right? And it worked. And so he started to like, I started to piece it all together, and I ended up emailing like one of the hiring managers, and I was like, hey, I know you're hiring for this vice president role. I'm 22. But can I like learn? Can I like, I really want to get into this, that kind of stuff. And they all took a chance on me. And, you know, that conversation where he's like, no, don't leave yet. Like, we will find a place for you in this industry, has stayed with me as I have mentored other students, other early career professionals throughout a bunch of different methods and mediums and whatever, right? Just say, hey, like, it's okay. There's so many other things you can do than traditional aerospace engineering. And especially now with the growing, booming commercial space economy, we need everyone. So we need event planners, right? And I became like, there's not that many event planners in the space industry, and I love event planning, so it works out really well. And so now I can market that as a skill that I have as a, you know, a consultant, a freelancer. And I wouldn't, if I hadn't had that conversation and that mentor, I don't know if I'd be here today.
I love that. And I think that also shows that, you know, you can be in one trajectory, but then next thing you know, you're going in a different direction. And sometimes it's that one mentor that changed your life. And it's okay sometimes to have a second career, third career, to totally change what you're doing, and to move into something where you're doing what your degree is in, but now you're doing something in a completely different industry. So I love that. Emma, how about you? That mentor that just, you know, it got you where you're at right now today, or it continues to inspire you?
Well, it is hard to pick because I've been lucky to have an amazing suite of people who have really encouraged me on my journey. Two quick answers. The first is Dr. Netta Bakal. She is a cosmologist at Princeton who is also the undergraduate advisor for all the undergrads who majored in astrophysics. She has been in the field for many, many years and was friends with Vera Rubin, who discovered dark matter, and has just like seen it all, been through it all. And yet she is this incredible woman, icon in the field, would take the time to sit down with every undergraduate, talk to us about what our goals were, what our plans were, how we wanted to do research, where we wanted to do research, where we wanted to go after college. I will never forget the intentionality with which she asked us and deeply cared about us, and then still reaches out today to ask, how are you doing? What's going on? How can I support you? That really was such a model of the kind of mentor that I strive to be to all the people who I have the amazing privilege to meet. And then the other two that I quickly want to mention because they've had such an impact are people who I met through the Brooke Owens Fellowship. That program, again, it opens up a community, and there's so many amazing fellowships like it too. Shawna mentioned the Zenith one in Canada, and there's a whole suite of them now, a family, which is amazing. And my mentor in that program was Carissa Christensen. I had the chance to work at Bryce Tech, and she, again, CEO of the company, sat down with all the interns and said, okay, I'm here to support you. What do you want? And gave really practical advice in a way that I'd never seen someone do before. And showed how mentors can give kind of like inspirational, big picture, reflect on yourself kind of advice, but they can also say, oh, you like need to know how to do this thing, go to this website, use these settings, do that. And show the very tactical and practical way to help people. So those are two people who have been part of my journey and I'm deeply grateful for.
It's so powerful because sometimes you just have that mentor, and you have, I'm sure we've all had bad mentors too, people that came in our lives and we were hoping could inspire us but didn't. But I think through those relationships sometimes we learn how to be a good mentor. And I mean, all of you right now are in this group, so inspiring, and it's just so powerful to see that those mentors have turned you guys into the people that you are. Yeah, I'm going to ask a couple more questions on this panel. And we've had such great conversation. And of course, everyone who's watching, make sure to follow. You'll have the link above of everybody's LinkedIn, ways to follow us online and to reach out. But let's talk about breaking barriers, because as we know, we're moving forward into a time when, there's been a lot of issues and there's been a lot of people that are moving forward, and some that are first in something, but some that are just standing up and taking a stand and being like, look, this is what I'm passionate about. I want to make a difference. Sian, I'd love to get your thoughts kind of about, some of those barriers that you've seen and just how you're pushing forward to break them, and maybe some advice for others on how you can, stand down to be your own, and also that the industry can become more inclusive.
Oh yeah, definitely. It again, being a seasoned individual, I've been able to see a lot of things over my career, not just as a geoscientist. Not many women, particularly women of color, that are geologists, and then to also be pursuing a career in space. The big thing that I learned is, really kind of like find your authentic voice. And it's so great to see so many of us finally doing that. I grew up in a generation, especially as a woman of color, assimilate, don't step out of line, don't ruffle feathers, don't rock the boat. Because you become the angry Black woman, you become, the combative female, you become, all of these labels. And so you really kind of, I grew up in a society that really tried to box me in and limit me and tell me who I could be and what I could do. And that's one of the reasons why I credit, particularly my dad, because he was like, I don't care what, but, I think it's because having parents that grew up in segregation, I mean, you can't get any more boxed in than that with, the idea that you could, run into the wrong person and end up not having a life anymore as a result of that. And the fact that they were able to maintain optimism and the American dream through all of that, and then instill that into me and my siblings. And I think for my dad, it really was what my motto ended up being, space to inspire, how you can use your unique space, the space that makes you, you, how you can use your beautiful, unique space to inspire yourself and those around you and beyond. And I truly believe that a lot of life's journey is about finding your authentic voice and your space to inspire in whatever lane that might be, and then taking ownership of it and being proud to be in that lane, and not letting other people try to derail you or tell you that your message or the things that you're trying to do, when it's positive and inspiring and motivating, is the wrong thing to do.
I think that's great. Emma, how about you? I mean, you're talking about you're still in school. I'm sure, as one of the younger members of the panel, what's your advice when it comes to strategies to break these barriers?
I think the biggest thing is to kind of get around the myth that girls aren't interested in space. And girls aren't interested in science, and to remember that it's never been about like all of us being qualified enough or prepared enough or ready enough. It's about the messages that are persistent from age 5 and beyond about how we don't belong and we're not good enough. And helping the world kind of reframe that, step away from that privilege, and be able to lift up all the girls who are excited and who are interested and who just need to be able to have, like Sian was saying, somebody who they can look at and say, oh my gosh, like I see myself in this. I see that space where I can belong. And that's why I love all the work that so many women are doing on social media. Like Camille's just been incredible in breaking barriers in that and saying like, look, this is my story. Like it's important to tell these stories so that the next generation can look around and be able to see themselves in space. And I think the barriers are not about trying to convince more girls to like take science classes or math classes or do research. It's about how do we show these stories so that when they are interested and they do take the classes, they're not then pressured to leave and they don't feel like they're being told you're not good enough or you're not capable, because there is space for everyone in this industry.
I think that's the resounding theme here, which is great because we all believe it. We're all living that every day. And you were mentioning social media, educational programs, public outreach. I mean, Camille, how can these sorts of things really motivate that next generation of girls and women even in STEM?
Yeah, I mean, as I have been saying this whole time, I feel like a broken record at this point, but it's so important. Like social media can and has had very negative effects on the world, but at the same time, it can and has and absolutely does have real meaningful impact. Not only, this representation, right? I know we all keep saying that, but you can't necessarily be what you can't see. You have to know that that exists out there. You have to see somebody, not all the time, obviously, but a lot of people that you have to see, especially women and other minorities, that somebody else is doing that, right? Like there is a place for you in whatever you want to be doing. But I think it goes beyond that too. I think it goes beyond that into being vulnerable. And I think that that is a huge part of breaking down barriers, is being vulnerable, and all the things we were talking about with like information sharing and storytelling and things like that. But I'll give you like one quick example here that back to actually my Lockheed days when I was like 22 or 23, and I had like just started Galactic Gal. So I guess I was like 23 or 24. And I just started Galactic Gal, and they asked me to write like a blog post or whatever for their internal like Lockheed website. And I was like, me? Like, why me? Like, I'm just posting about space on social media, like, whatever. And and I was like, I do not belong. So I started having imposter syndromes, right? I was like, I do not belong on the like homepage of Lockheed Martin, like all these amazing people. It's a 100,000 person company, whatever. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to write about that. I'm going to write about imposter syndrome. And it became, I don't know to this day, but at the time, it was the most viewed blog post ever across all of Lockheed Martin's, like, 100,000 employees worldwide, blah, 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 right? And people like vice presidents or like executive vice presidents in the business, like started to reach out to me directly on like Skype. And I'm like, oh God, what did I do? And they're like, no one has ever talked about it, right? No one, especially in that generation, no one has talked about imposter syndrome until recent years. We don't talk about mental health, right? And they're like, I had never heard somebody talk about it like this, or at least this openly. And like, thank you for doing that. And then so many other like younger people started reaching out. And I think it's that type of vulnerability where I'm like, listen, I'm just sitting here telling y'all how I don't think I should be writing this blog post and how I don't even know how I got this job. Like, even though I did really great in school, like I deserve to have the job on paper, I still feel like I don't deserve it. And then everyone was like, oh my gosh, me too. And I think that's the type of thing, the type of vulnerability, the type of openness we need a lot more of in order to break down a lot more barriers.
I think that's great. And Shawna, we're talking about how these educational programs, social media, public outreach is inspiring the next generation of women. And, just how kind of personally what you think is your words of advice for using these platforms to really, no pun intended, or I guess so, because, we're in space, but lift off, with your life or with your dream.
Yeah, I want to seize on some themes that Sian and Emma had talked about earlier, which I think is really critical to talk about. So that's the imposter syndrome. And, I give so many keynotes, and I've just started asking about it and leaning into it and just asking the entire room to raise their hand if they've never felt the imposter syndrome. And, the standing offer is if someone raises their hand one of these days, they get to come up on stage and they get to finish the keynote, because to date, no one has raised their hand. So, whether, you're achieving your dreams and living your best life, whether you're just starting out, just know that it's so common. And that we've all encountered it. And that's, you see that the first day of medical school, we're all secretly wondering, when the dean's office is going to realize their mistake and kick us back out. You see that, at the astronautics ground school, it's prevalent amongst high achievers, because you always want to do your best to the potential of what you know you can be, and you don't want to let anyone down. And so the way that I've started to broach it, and the way I advise to broach it, is twofold. So the first one's kind of nerdy and medical, but that's simply to dissect the feeling. So that's, do I, in medical school, do I feel like I'm not smart enough? If the answer is yes, then the pathway is okay. Well, is there merit to that feeling? And if the answer is no, then you can just name your insecurity and throw it away and not pay it any mind. And if the answer is yes, I feel smart, yes, there is merit to that, I don't feel smart enough, then the next pathway is, okay, why? Is it because I don't read enough? Okay, well, then if that's true, then I'll just read more. And so you can address your insecurities in that way. So that's the first way, is dissecting the feeling and naming it. And then the second part of it is viewing this new opportunity you're in that you don't yet feel ready for, you don't feel good enough for, as a growth opportunity. Because even if you don't feel ready for it, even if you don't believe that you belong to be there, or you deserve to be there, someone at some point believed in your capabilities. They saw what you were doing and they put you in this position. So it's up to you to grow and rise to that occasion. So for anyone out there who's listening, who's kind of saying that, oh, maybe I'm not ready for this, maybe I'm not the best person, maybe you are the best person, and take that hypothesis and grow into your program, into your new position, and view every challenge that you have as a growth opportunity.
I love that. And personally, myself, I'm going through that, the whole imposter syndrome, the changing of careers. And so I'm sure there's a lot of other people out there that are either doing that or they're thinking about it. So it's so good to hear from all of you, just kind of how to make that transition, or it's sometimes that little nudge to know you have wings and you can spread them and fly. You just need other people to support you. And most importantly, you have to believe in yourself. So I have another question for you, Sian. We're wrapping things up here. I mean, we could probably talk for hours and it's great, but I want to know kind of what's your vision for the future of women in space, and how can we ensure that more women have opportunities to be leaders, whether it's on the ground or whether it's going to be up in space?
Oh, that's a great question. For the future, I'm all about creating that Star Trek future that I call it, it's a Star Wars acronym, but it's a Star Trek meaning all the way, a just, equitable, diverse, and inclusive space for all of humanity. And in order to do that, you need active allies. You need people with power and position who literally actively want to create Jedi space. And I feel like the poster child for that is my commander, Jared Isaacman. I mean, he did the most dangerous thing you can do. He's like, I want to go to space. And instead of going with his family or his buddies, all of who his buddies are all like fighter pilots from the military, he gave the seats away to complete strangers, people he didn't know. And then thought, that it would just work out, that you could take, random strangers, and that he could come together with them and successfully go to space for 3 days. And he gave me, Haley, and Chris opportunities that we never ever imagined we would be able to get. I never thought I would be the first Black woman to pilot a spaceship, or the first Black person to paint in space, or the first artist. I mean, he to be selected to become an astronaut. But that was all because Jared realized he had power and position to make a difference, and to set up. He said, "This is going to be the first ever, and I'm not going to do it where I'm taking my buddies. I'm going to do something that's inspirational and will change the way that we think about human spaceflight." We need more Jareds in the world. That's what I would say. People with power and position, who are thoughtful and actively creating Jedi space, just, equitable, diverse, inclusive space for all of humanity.
Shawna had just put in the chat that she had chills. I think many of us, I get speechless sometimes, which is hard to believe. But when I hear you talk like that, when I hear other people sharing stories like this, I mean, I think this is really inspiring our future generations. Emma, how about you? I mean, what's kind of a quick reaction to what you heard and how you feel about the future of space, and inspiring and motivating other women to really get involved, no matter what their background or their career is?
I mean, I'm so excited about space because I think that it's not just about space. When we talk about what we're doing in space every day, a lot of it is around satellites, but even what's around the farther exploration to the moon, to Mars, all of it has applications back to Earth. And to me, that is what is almost more exciting about it than even going out. It's what we learn about ourselves and our own place in the universe. I mean, in my day-to-day, I study planets that are light years away from us, but stepping back every night and like, wow, I'm here on this planet and I'm alive and we're all alive. That to me is the most incredible part of it. So my future vision of space really revolves around a world where we can use that looking out to look back. And as we face challenges like climate change, as we deal with pandemics, as we deal with inequities of all kinds around the world, that we can use space as this beacon for all of humanity to kind of pause and breathe together and then continue taking action to make the world a better place every day. It's about looking out, but also to look back home and using that sense of practical hope every day.
Wonderful. How about you, Camille? I know that's kind of like your middle name, just the leading and exploring, just moving forward like you've been doing in your work.
Yeah, no, I mean, everything Emma just said, like the future of space, like using space for Earth, not overextending the environment of space. I mean, obviously we got the space debris problem we need to figure out, all of that stuff. But in terms of like specifically women in space and the future of that, I think all of us want to see more women in space, more women astronauts, more women leading missions, but also just in general, like more women in the space industry is not only going to make it more inclusive, but it's also going to make it just better for all of the downstream applications, right? All the things Emma was just talking about. Like I think all of us here, like any woman watching this can see like, technology is not built by women for women, right? And that's slowly changing. But I mean, we've all interacted with a piece of technology that we're like, it doesn't listen to my voice because it's too high pitched. Like I have this like really expensive like lapel mic or whatever, and it's like clearly not a single woman with my pitch or tone or whatever like tested this because it doesn't work for me. So things like that, like if you extend that to space, we're going to design better for, inclusivity. We're going to design for more people to be involved. And we're going to have those female perspectives that we all know are very, very, very important coming down into downstream applications. How do we solve climate change? How do we solve food scarcity? How do we solve space debris? Any of these challenges that we're seeing in space and for Earth now.
Shawna, how about you? What do you think is going to be the way we can work together to ensure that women are getting these opportunities and having that encouragement moving forward?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, I just like to say, make space for yourself. So don't let anyone tell you don't belong here. We need all comers. We need the storytellers, the artists, the educators, the communicators, the physicians, the pilots, the engineers. So figure out what it is that you want your role to be in space, because there is a role, and then work really, really, really hard to get there. And then just don't let anyone tell you don't belong here, because you do. So make space for yourself.
I love that. Well, we are down to the final seconds and minutes. So what I want to do is, before we wrap this up and continue our celebrations of World Space Week this year, which runs from the 4th through the 10th, if there is one message that you can get out as we kind of wrap together all of the incredible inspiration that's come out of this panel so far, what is that one piece of advice, that passion, that quote that you want to leave everybody with who is watching this today? Emma, let's start with you.
You have everything that you need inside of you. All the amazing people in this industry, it is people who have a dream and a vision, a passion, excitement. And no matter what the world tells any of us about whether we belong in rooms, or whether we are capable of leading teams, or whether we are capable of facing whatever challenge is in front of us, you all have what you need to face those challenges inside of you. And we need the world to shift on the outside, but it's never about adding more to any of us. It's about bringing out what we already have to share with the world.
Love it. Camille.
We are standing on the cusp of the next revolution, right? Or one of the next revolutions. We got AI, we got clean energy, we got all these revolutions, but we also have space, and space is literally going to change, and it already has, but it's going to continue to change the the fundamental way that we do life, do business, connect with each other, and also who we are as a species, and explore the universe. There's a place in that for you. And just like Shawna was saying, just like I think everyone has said on this panel, you don't have to be a rocket scientist. You don't have to be the smartest person in the room. You don't have to have a 4.0 and nothing like that, right? We need everyone, and there is space for everyone in this industry.
Lovely. Sian?
There will only ever be one of you, and how you use your beautiful, unique space, this space that makes you you, how you use your beautiful, unique space to inspire yourself and those around you matters. So go out there and let your earth light shine.
And Shawna?
Yeah, I think the only parting advice I have is that this is the best possible time to be involved in space. There's so many opportunities, whether you're a student starting out, there's student groups, whether you're a professional looking for your first, foray into space, there's so many conferences. So this is your opportunity to architect that future of space that you want to see. And, ask yourself what you want humanity's presence in space to look like in 2040, 2050 and beyond. And then go out and set about creating that future for yourself, and then do it with really good people, because the only thing better than going to space is doing it with an amazing and stellar team.
This panel today was so powerful. And the insights that every single woman brought today, the different backgrounds, the different cultures, the different passions, the different origins. I mean, just a reason we're all together, and we celebrate every year World Space Week, but we should be celebrating our world in space every single day. And the world is changing, our climate's changing. It's going to be such a different world that we're going to see, not just here on Earth, but in space within the next decade, or even within the next couple of years. But I think from what we learned today and the women that we spoke to, it just reminds you to go find yourself inside and let that Earth light shine. Go out there, be the one breaking barriers, be the one that's standing up for yourself and reaching out and networking with other people and lifting other women up, and knowing that even if you start at the bottom of the ladder, there's always going to be somebody up there that's going to help you up that next step. And so, Emma, Camille, Sian, Shawna, and Emily, so happy to have you on this panel to kick off World Space Week 2024. And I really hope whoever watched, you share this with someone that could benefit, because it just takes one person to change your life, as we talked about here. And as I'll leave you, the Rocket Girl report, as I'll say this, is that the galaxy is your limit. So go leave your legacy amongst the stars.